Coming up in today's newscast, the Knesset votes on a long-awaited bill on ultra-Orthodox enlistment in the army. The IDF launches a new app to deter soldiers from being kidnapped. And welcome to the future. An Israeli startup is now serving up 3-minute gourmet meals in freeze-dried pots. Today, the Knesset is set to vote on a new bill that significantly rewrites the law on ultra-Orthodox exemption from the IDF. In the past, members of this community were not required to enlist into the army on religious grounds, but this exemption was struck down by the courts last year, forcing the government to reach a new compromise, a compromise that's being put to the test in today's crucial first vote. The new bill would still allow the ultra-Orthodox to largely evade the mandatory draft into the IDF, but would require a yearly quota from this community to enlist. For example, if the bill were to become law this year, roughly 4,000 ultra-Orthodox would be legally required to enlist, a number that would slowly increase over the next several years. If the community fails to meet this quota target by less than 95%, the government would punish the community in the form of economic sanctions against religious yeshivas or Jewish seminaries. The issue of ultra-Orthodox exemption from the army is easily one of the most divisive debates in modern Israeli history. The bill itself fully embodies that fissure. Ultra-Orthodox members of Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition have already turned against their Knesset allies, saying that not a single Charedi should be required to enlist. Longtime Netanyahu opponents, however, now find themselves aligning with the Prime Minister's coalition, namely Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid party, hoping to find a compromise on this issue. Rumor is that Charedi parties will not topple the coalition as they've threatened to do in the past. But at the same time, Israeli media has already reported that talks are underway to set early elections if the first reading of this bill comes to pass. That means that all parties may be casting their votes today in anticipation of elections on the near horizon. Returning now to our studio with more on the Charedi enlistment legislation is Rabbi Dov Halbertal, who is the former head of the Office of the Chief Rabbi of Israel, and Rabbi Ariel Konstantyn, the founding rabbi at the Tel Aviv International Synagogue. Thank you both so much for being here today. So to begin, I think we can agree that Israel deserves to be protected and needs to have an army. Do you agree with this?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, so what is the issue then with Charedi enlistment in the army?
There are actually two big burdens here in Israel. The army, a very serious, risky, and sensitive on one hand. But on the other hand, you have another burden. The other burden is the spiritual one. Meaning, as we saw it as Haredim, keeping the DNA of the Jewish nation, you need the yeshiva world to exist, as it is nowadays. Taking those to the army, it will stop to exist.
Why is it impossible to continue the yeshiva and do military? Why is it impossible both to do Torah study and to work in the army?
You can see the film. It's impossible because it's against the nature. It's against the nature of a man. You know, going to the most materialistic place in the world is an army. An army, you know, you become materialistic, you see everything, you know, that it's not. And coming out from such a spiritual world to a place materialistic like this, it will ruin you in one moment.
Rabbi Konstantyn, what's your
I'm sorry, that absolutely has no bearing whatsoever. You have Hesder Yeshiva programs where students are fully ingrained in study of Torah and the highest level. You're saying that they're not engaged in the spirit. These are people engaged in the spirit. These are Talmidei Chachamim that come out of this, the Torah scholars, and they both serve in the army and they study Torah on the highest level, and there is no reason why this community cannot equally engage in Torah study and the spiritual elements and serve in the army. Further to that, from all history, we've always had the Jewish religious leaders who are the leaders of the army. Yoshua ben Nun, it says, Lech, you know, he was told to, B'char lanu anashim hilachem b'Amalek machar. Go out, choose yourself some soldiers, and you go fight. Who was Yoshua ben Nun? The one who was given the rule, V'agita bo yomam v'layla. You shall study day and night. And yet he was the one personally out there fighting. The Maccabees, they were fighting. Okay, they were religious elites. You had David HaMelech, who was the head of the army.
That's
He was
not
a
an
Talmid
argument
Chacham.
at all. I will tell you why. It's not an argument at all. Because in those days, historically you are right, but in those days, all the Jewish nation was religious. Were keeping mitzvot, were studying and learning. Today, 70% are assimilating in the States.
So
Non-secular
how does that
here,
fare?
non-secular, non-religious here,
Rob-
85%. So you have the DNA
Also-
of keeping the Jewish identity. It's 10%,
Rabbi
not
Ariel,
more
that
than it.
contradicts
You need
serving
them.
in the army.
You need
There's
them
no
urgently.
contradiction.
Hold on. So what I'd like to follow up with what you're just saying. You know, the birth rate in Israel. If we take the birth rate in Israel, the ultra-Orthodox birth rate is 2-to-1 that of non-Charedim. Okay, by 2060, they're estimated to be half of the population. At that point, you know, with that trend continuing, how is it that you can say that there won't be this identity, this DNA in Israel?
Maybe it will come a time. Maybe. I don't see it so fast as you say. You say it in 30 years. It's not. The non-religious are not going from here anywhere. But
No, but the birth rate
let's say,
is
let's
not-
say it's not the birth. You know, it's they said it 50 years ago also. But let's assume it. If it will happen, that the rate will be like you said before, and we will be 50-60%. Maybe things will change. Nowadays, in the situation now that we are 10% and keeping the DNA of the Jewish nation, we cannot go serve in the army.
So
It shows
do
a
you-
weakness in the
Two
DNA.
burdens,
It
different
shows a
battle.
weakness in the community because if the Dati Leumi community can successfully keep that
Not
DNA
successfully,
and
they're
serve
not
in the
keeping
army,
it.
they
Yeah,
are
hold
100%
on,
keeping it,
let
and
me
they are promoting both living Torah in full lives and living and doing the army. We're also talking about 3 years here. We're talking about studying Torah before they can continue as Avrechim, studying Torah after. The army is they provide for the Charedim in the army. My own nephew served in the army and as a Charedi, and he came out fully 100% religious and continues to study Torah. There is no contradiction in those 3 years. Their needs are provided for, and I have a solution as well. I think where this can be resolved for the elite. When Ben Gurion gave the exemption, he gave an exemption for the elite, not for the masses. Now, I believe that the elite should continue to study Torah. As my daughter is in the army right now as a religious sporteit mitzdayenet, which is a elite athlete. So they have exemptions for elite athletes, elite musicians and singers, that they can continue to be the best of Israel and serve in the army. They can do the same thing with the Torah scholars, that they can serve within the context of the army. They can even study and have to report at 6 a.m. and for davening and do within a military structure that makes sure that they are studying
Konstantyn,
and they're not just goofing
who
off.
talks about elite? We are talking about keeping the identity of the Jewish community, not elite of 2%. We want to keep the Jewish nation. Keeping the Jewish nation means that we need
how does that happen?
more and more yeshiva boys
Because they
studying
only
again
don't-
and not going to the army because
the secular
those
don't
Zion-
maintain the Jewish nation.
religious Zionists that are going to the army,
Alright.
they are not the same.
So they're not maintaining the Jewish
Not
identity.
maintaining.
Wow.
Unfortunately, this, as you can see, this conversation is as heated here as it probably is in the Knesset. Rabbis, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
All right. The Army has just made a massive new purchase of Israeli military tech in the United States. This new deal, valued